Welcome to another Explainer. Today, we're doing something a bit different. We're going to completely deconstruct a concept I think we all assume we already understand, and that is ultimate reality. Because as we're about to see, just a simple shift in this one foundational paradigm, it literally changes absolutely everything. Okay, let's dive into this. We all know the word God, right? We've heard it since we were kids. We see it shape rituals, prayers, holidays, basically daily life. But here's the thing. If we're actually going to sit down and discuss it, or debate it, or maybe even reject it, do we actually share a common, agreeable definition of what that word means? You've probably heard this incredibly famous statement from the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche: God is dead. Honestly, it sounds pretty intense and absolute, doesn't it? But if we take a step back and look at the historical context, post-Enlightenment thinkers like Nietzsche weren't actually trying to negate some universal, objective concept of the divine. They were really reacting to and negating a very specific, culturally conditioned definition of God. And that specific definition, it comes straight out of Europe's Dark Ages, so roughly between 500 and 1000 CE. Dogmatic religious institutions pretty much completely overshadowed reason. Total, unquestioning faith was demanded over logic. So the prevalent concept of God during this era was basically like a supreme dictator. A monarch up in the sky who was wrathful towards non-believers and super eager to punish anyone worshiping so-called false gods. And actually, this is the Eurocentric worldview that a lot of people still blindly project onto the rest of the world today when they talk about religion. Section 1. The Creator Conundrum. Seeking the First Cause. Let's move to this and see how it builds. As rational humans, we're naturally wired to look for patterns of cause and effect. We look around at this incredibly complex, beautifully ordered universe, and we ask the ultimate question, right? Who or what created all of this? But if we assume the universe needs an external creator, like a god sitting up in the clouds painting the universe onto a canvas, we hit some massive logical roadblocks almost immediately. Think about it. If the universe requires a creator, where exactly was that creator before creation happened? If they existed in some other realm or heaven, well, who built that realm? And ultimately, if God is the creator, who created the creator? And this right here brings us to a huge philosophical trap called the infinite regress fallacy. It's basically a sequence of reasoning that just demands further and further explanation, going on forever without ever actually resolving. Well, the ancient Indian seers, known as rishis, saw this fallacy crystal clear. They logically pointed out that, hey, if God can exist without a creator, then logically, the universe could just exist without a creator too. So viewing God merely as a separate external builder, it just doesn't hold up to rigorous logic. Section 2. The Dancer and the Dance, a New Paradigm. So if that supreme dictator model is logically flawed, what exactly is the alternative? Well, think of the difference between a painter and a painting versus a dancer and a dance. In that Dark Ages concept we talked about, the creator is the painter. They are completely separate from the canvas, existing entirely outside of it. But in Indian knowledge systems, the universe isn't a separate entity manufactured by God. Instead, it's a direct expression and manifestation of the supreme reality itself. The universe is the dance, and this brilliantly illustrates the fact that you simply cannot separate the dance from the dancer. To really cement this idea, let's look at this beautiful analogy from the Mundaka Upanishad. It says, as a spider projects forth and draws back its threads, the universe emerges from the imperishable being. So in this view, Ishwara, or the Supreme Being, is not some heavenly monarch governing us from afar. No, Ishwara is the real self of every single creature, completely and totally pervading everything in existence. There's this incredibly vivid story from the Bhagavata Purana that anchors this concept so perfectly. Basically, you have this evil king, Hiranyakashipu, and he challenges his deeply devoted son Prahlada to prove that his supreme being, Narayana, was actually everywhere. The king points and asks, is he in this pillar? And in this massive fit of anger, he just smashes the stone pillar. Instantly, Narayana appears right out of the broken stone as Narasimha to protect Prahlada. The core lesson here? The Supreme Being is all-pervading. It's literally everywhere. It's not confined to one specific time or one place or one distant heaven. Section 3. The Logic of Many Gods. So this brings up a very natural paradox you might be wondering about. If ultimate reality is just one single, all-pervading consciousness, why on earth are there so many gods in Indian culture? Well, it essentially comes down to understanding our own human limitations. Look, we have highly advanced brains, absolutely, but our senses and our ability to reason are still fundamentally limited. It's incredibly hard for us to wrap our heads around an unlimited absolute reality when our minds are constantly trying to objectify things. The ancient rishis understood this limitation perfectly. So what do? They presented Ishwara on multiple intellectual levels so that people from all different walks of life and all different capacities could actually grasp it. Now, what's really interesting here is how ancient this understanding actually is. The Rig Veda clearly states, "To what is one, sages give many a title. They call it Agni, Yama, Mataresvan." This proves that the hundreds of different deities we see in Indian culture aren't competing gods at all. They are simply different manifestations, different titles for the exact same singular reality. Which leads us to this really beautiful concept called Ishta Devata, which means a favorite chosen deity. Because the absolute is so vast and hard to grasp, you can literally choose a deity that aligns with your own specific mental and spiritual orientation. It basically serves as a personalized intellectual entry point into supreme reality. And the absolute genius of this system is that there's no need to fight over whose god is the true god. For a devotee, their specifically chosen deity perfectly represents the entire unified, woven thread of the universe. Section 4. The tradition of peaceful debate. Now, how a society actually defines ultimate reality directly impacts how its people end up treating each other. Because Indian knowledge systems focused on living according to Dharma and recognizing that underlying unity rather than enforcing some rigid dogma, they actively encouraged intellectual debates based on logic and reason. They even engaged peacefully with the Charvaka school. If you don't know them, the Charvaka school completely rejected God and advocated for a strictly materialistic worldview. They were essentially the ancient version of YOLO, you only live once. But the key here is, instead of the inquisitions, or witch hunts, or brutal religious wars that we saw during Europe's Dark Ages, India fostered logical rebuttals and open dialogue. I love this legendary example of a great debate between Acharya Shankara and Acharya Mandana Mishra. The rules of engagement here were just fascinating. The judge for the debate was a woman named Ubaya Bharati. And the amazing part, she was actually Mandana Mishra's wife. Yet Shankara trusted her strict intellectual neutrality completely. The rule she set was that both of these debaters had to wear fresh flower garlands around their necks. The condition, whichever garland withered first would indicate failure in the debate. So the crucial point is, why did the flowers matter? Well, debaters were meant to seek truth purely through logic. If you start losing your mental peace during an argument, it causes anger and stress. And biologically speaking, anger raises your body temperature, right? That excess body heat would literally wither the delicate flower garland. The true test of intellect wasn't just about having the right facts, it was about maintaining absolute mental tranquility. Shankara kept his peace, his flowers stayed fresh, and he successfully won the debate. Let's summarize this core contrast. The Dark Ages resolution involved violent clashes over a very rigid, dictatorial concept of ultimate reality, which tragically led to religious wars, bloodshed, and millions of deaths worldwide. Conversely, the Indian resolution prioritized intellectual debates rooted in the idea of an all-pervading consciousness. This led to philosophical exchange, peaceful conversion, and true pluralism. Differing definitions of the divine literally dictate a culture's history of either violence or intellectual peace. Which brings us to a provocative thought I want to leave you with today. If our underlying definition of ultimate reality so drastically shapes how we treat each other as humans, what other fundamental paradigms are we just blindly accepting in our daily lives? Thank you so much, Focus Learners, for joining me for this explainer. I really encourage you to keep utilizing these frameworks, keep looking closely at the world around you, and as always, keep questioning your ingrained assumptions. See you next time.